Okay, you guys, so I've got everything set up here. We're about to get ready to get into some practice stuff. I've got my grids ready. We're going to use these little practice sheets as an exercise to start learning how to use the trigger and how to get some good control over the paint flow. But before we get into that, I want to go over just some basic tips for using your airbrush that are going to be, good for your safety and just good overall general knowledge before we get started. Okay, so let's talk about safety a little bit. If you're going to be using like these little enamel paints here, these are oil-based, you want to make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. I'm out in my shop here. I have an exhaust and, I've got my back door open, so it's very well ventilated. And, if you're in your house or you're somewhere where you can't maybe open a window, make sure you're wearing a mask and make sure it's a pretty open space. You don't want to be closed in a space where you're, spraying these enamel things, these oil-based paints. It's not good for you to breathe that in. So make sure you're wearing a mask, make sure it's well ventilated. And also make sure you're checking the manufacturer for any recommendations when it comes to safety on the paint label. There's going to be some sort of like safety regulations or precautions on those paint bottles, so make sure you check those. Okay, and also make sure you have your cleaning stuff nearby. So I've got this big like basin of water, and I also have one of these squirt bottles. These are super handy. I got this on Amazon. It was, gosh, I don't know, it was less than 10 bucks. I can't remember exactly, but you just give it a little squirt, and it's just fun too. It's just fun to squirt water. So what I do in between color changes so that I don't have to break down this whole thing, I simply just squirt some water in here and let it run clear, hold the air compressor down until the paint runs clear, and it's just spraying water out of there. It's a nice way to clean that out, clean that paint out, because you're going to want to clean your paint cup in between every color. You don't want to put more color in there when you've already got another color in there, because they're going to mix and it's going to take forever for it to come out. So just make sure you have like one of these little squirt bottles nearby. That way you can squirt paint right into the paint cup as you're painting, and it's going to help make that paint get washed out of there. You can also get one of these cleaning pots. These are great. So I'm going to show you all this later in real detail. We're going to have a whole chapter, a whole section about cleaning and maintenance. But just real quick before we get started, I'm going to make sure you know to have this stuff nearby. This is a great little thing to have nearby when you're painting. So when you get ready to squirt some water in your cup and you need to just let it run through because you're not painting anything, you can get one of these cleaning pots. You just put it right in here and let it spray in there, and the cleaning pot will absorb all of that moisture and all of that paint and water, so it's not just like flying around all over the place. It also comes with these little filters like this. You stick it in this little top area, this top little receptacle thing. It's hard, thing's kind of hard to get off. Okay, put the little filter inside this little area right here, and that keeps it from filtering back out, because there's got to be some airflow in here, because you're blowing air and moisture into the pot, so there's got to be some way for it to pass through, and there's a little filter in here to keep it from coming back out into the air. So this is great to have nearby when you're going to be painting with a lot of colors. You can just spray the excess into the pot and set it to the side. Like I said earlier, when you're doing a small project, you don't need to put a lot of paint in here. A little bit of paint goes a long way. That little airdropper is a great example of how much to use. A couple of squirts of this is pretty much all you're going to need for a small project. We are going to be practicing on our grids here in a second, and I'm just going to put a couple of squirts of paint in here, and that's going to last us the entire time. So don't need to fill that paint cup up completely. Like I said, it's good to have like a practice sheet nearby, and normally I get poster board. They're super cheap. I mean, they're like 60 or 70 cents for a giant piece of cardboard. So I'll get one of those and I will put it on my easel, and I have it nearby to do like an initial couple of swipes with my paint, especially when I've changed a color. Even though you wash it out with water and you put some cleaner in there, there's gonna be a little bit of residual color in there. So you're gonna wanna like have like a poster board or maybe even a piece of paper or some cardstock or something nearby that you can just paint onto real quick to make sure that your new color is coming through. So if you're completely new to airbrushing, you're gonna wanna practice with this. I've got a great practice exercise. We're gonna start it in just a second. I got my grids over here. I'm gonna show you some techniques for practice and you can follow along. The grid sheets are in your ebook. You can print those out. And I recommend printing out, 2 or 3 of each one. That's gonna help you get some good practice in and get some good techniques controlling the trigger. Okay guys, so I think we're ready to move on to painting. Those are just some general tips and some ways to keep your area nice and clean and set up and ready to go when you're getting ready to paint with your airbrush. So let's move on to practice. I'm super excited, you guys. I got it ready to go. My compressor is completely charged up. I've got my small paint cup here. This is a brand new one. I'm excited to use it. It's never been used before. And it's gonna give us some good practice for later too, because we're gonna take it apart and clean it. And I'm gonna show you all the steps you need to take to do for that. Okay, so let's get to practice. Okay guys, so it is time to start practicing. I've got my grid sheets here. These are my large grids, and then I've got some smaller ones with some lines here we can start practicing. And I've got my airbrush here. And these are the cardstock bits I've got back here. So we're gonna use these for practice. We're just going to turn the airbrush on and start doing some little squiggles. We just wanna turn it on, make sure the airflow is good, make sure the paint is coming through okay. And like I said, it's nice to have a few of these handy and nearby so that you can test your color as you're going. So I'm gonna just adjust the control knob here, get it all the way open, make sure we're good and tight on there, and just turn it on. Just click this button on, and then this is what makes the paint come out. So we're gonna give it, ooh, oh my gosh, look how pretty it is. Oh wow, so it's just coming out so open, so much paint coming out. Look how pretty that color is. This is a blue-green mix. It's one of my favorite mixes. Okay, so that color is coming out great. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use our grid to kind of practice control. 1, 2. We're gonna practice some tiny little dots like this, and then we're gonna practice some larger dots. Open it back up. Then we're gonna practice some larger dots like this. And you can kind of get control using this adjustable knob to get the tiny little dots, open it up to get the larger ones, and then we can go full on, open it all the way up, oops, and get the larger ones. And then as you pull away, obviously you get larger spheres. So that's what we're gonna do next. We're gonna move on to creating some larger and smaller dots. Okay guys, so I've got my larger grid sheet here ready to go. We're gonna start practicing with some of these larger circles. So I know the space is small right here, so you wanna start with something like this, but you can also use, 4 together and, practice like a even larger sphere. So I'm gonna turn this on. Got it opened up pretty good. So it's gonna give us a good wide spray. So I'm just gonna start in and then kind of pull it back. And I want to look for like filling up that space with that circle. So I'm just pulling on the trigger like halfway, and then just doing a little swirly motion. I can get darker with it in the center, or I can pull the trigger all the way, and it's gonna give me a pretty good size sphere that fills up that hole. You're going to get some overspray. If you want to get like really precise painting stuff, you can get some of those stencils. You can get the stencils that are round that have those like hole cut out, so you can get like completely precise circles without any edges. But for now, we're just using this to practice. So you see what I'm doing? I'm starting kind of close up, and then I'm pulling away to kind of get the size circle that I want. Now you can stay back here. Only pull the trigger about halfway, and then just kind of swirl till you get the circle size that you want. If you want to have more control over that trigger so that you don't have to feel halfway, you can just close it in a little bit, and then your trigger's only going to go back halfway on its own. You won't have to control it so much. That's what this little adjustable knob does for you. It kind of controls how far you can pull that trigger. So there, I've got it set to where I can only pull it halfway. It won't let me go any further. And so that gives me more control, and I can be a little bit more controlled about how I make these swirls. So I'm just literally making some little swirly patterns here. And I'm just practicing my control over this airbrush. Like I said, you can come in here and practice doing a whole quadruple section here. Practice these swirls like this. It's so much fun, you guys, so much fun. Okay, let's move on to the little ones. Turn this on. Sorry, turn it off. Sorry if you can't hear me very well. So I've got a bunch, you know, I printed out a bunch of these so we could practice a lot. My advice is to print out several. Remember, the goal here is to just get your circle in that little grid pattern. If you happen to, you know, go big or go small, just practice. That's what this is all about. You're familiarizing yourself with how to get control over the gun. So if you're not great at it right away, that's okay. I've been practicing with it for quite a while now, so I'm a little bit better now than I was in the beginning. So just practice. That's why we print out these grid sheets. That's why we're doing this, so we can get good at controlling that airflow. So I'm gonna adjust my knob all the way down. Again, if you feel really comfortable with how far you can push this trigger in, you don't have to adjust this knob. This is just really to give you more, to control how far you're pulling that trigger in. So I'm gonna turn the airbrush back on. We're gonna hit these little dots. So we're just trying to make tiny little circles here. We're just practicing some little baby circles. Okay, here we go. Let's try these little ones. So if you need to hold it with both hands, do that, because it will give you some more control over the brush. So we're just practicing filling in these little bitty holes. Again, I adjusted the knob so I can control how far I'm able to pull back that trigger, and it's allowing me to create these little dots. I'm not always right in the center, but I'm good at making the little dots though. Okay, so that was super fun. Turn it off. Now, I'm gonna go back. Let's practice, let's practice doing some of these lines. I'm gonna turn it like, whoops. I gotta get control of myself. Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna practice these lines, and all this is for is just like literally practicing following along that line. Okay, here we go. Turn it on. I've still got it down pretty low so that I don't pull back on this trigger very far, and I'm gonna be able to get a smaller line here. So all I'm doing is like practicing following along this line. Just want to get control over how well I can follow a line. I mean, this whole practice is just about getting control over making sure that you're painting and flowing along where you want to paint. Okay, not bad. Started out with a bigger line, and as I got down, I got a little closer and ended up with a smaller line. So now we're gonna practice a couple of other techniques. I'm gonna get my cardstock back, and then we're gonna practice some different spheres just on an open field without the grids. Okay, so this is called Big Fish, Little Fish. We're gonna do a big sphere and then a tiny sphere, and then a big sphere and then a tiny sphere. So we're just trying to control, again, what we're doing with the brush. We wanna be able to either go big or go small. So we're gonna try that now. I've got it pretty, like, it's like halfway. It's like halfway open. That'll be able to, I can still create a larger sphere and create a tiny one. So let's try it. So this is my larger sphere, and then I'm going to create a little one. Larger, smaller. Larger, smaller. Larger, smaller. Larger, smaller. So I'm going to go even bigger, larger, smaller. Larger, smaller. Larger, smaller. Larger, smaller. Okay. So it's just a handy little exercise to kind of give you some practice. Create a large sphere here like this, kind of nice even color, and then just kind of swoop around this bottom edge and then add just a little bit more color, and it kind of just gives it a nice little shaded look. It's like a quick little shading project. So you just create a big sphere, and then just in the bottom corner add a little bit more color. So it just kind of gives it a little 3D effect. So that's just kind of like a small little introductory way to shade. Feel free to continue on practicing, print out a lot of these sheets, and just keep practicing and get some more control over these airbrush paint settings. Play around with tightening up the control knob and loosening the control knob so that you can sort of get a good feel for where you feel most comfortable. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, so just keep practicing. Print out some of these grid sheets, keep going with it, and just see where it takes you. You know, using these grids and getting like a start here and then moving on to projects is really going to help you. But we're going to start with some small projects, so let's get to it.